Greetings and salutations! I'm Janet from World Anvil, and today we're going to talk about what you need to decide when you're starting a new world building project. We're going to go through some questions you can ask yourself to help streamline the world building process, help you figure out what to work on next, and prevent the dreaded Worldbuilders Disease. If you're new to world building, or if you're thinking about building a new world setting, then this is the video for you. It's time to light up the forge. Let's jump straight in with the first question, and that's the age-old, what is my motivation? The first thing you want to pin down is why you are creating the world and what you want to get out of it. There are loads of great reasons to start building a new world setting. Maybe you're writing a new novel, maybe you're starting a new RPG campaign, or maybe you just love world building because it's damn fun. Here's a list of reasons why people start new world building projects, but it's not exhaustive. Grab a piece of paper, or open up your World Anvil world and write this down on the world's meta page. So now we've figured out why you're starting this new world, let's figure out what you hope to get out of it. Here's a list of motivations from our own World Anvil community. Maybe a few pop out at you. If so, make a note of them. Keep this information somewhere safe. You're going to be going back to it again and again. So now you've figured out your motivations behind why you're creating this new world setting, why you're world building it, and what you hope to get out of it, you can go back to this information every time you have a question about your world building. For example, should I choose X or Y? Well, which one serves your motivation better? Which one would your players enjoy more? Which one gives you more joy? What should I build next? Well, again, which serves your motivations better? Where are your players going to go next? What part of history do you really want to research so you can work it into your game? How much detail should I build in? Well, how much do you need to satisfy your motivation? A side character in your novel isn't going to need as much expansion as a main character, a POV character, so you don't need to do as much world building for your book Bible. You can always expand it later, of course. Choosing your motivation will help you with all aspects of your world building. It'll stop you getting stagnated or stuck, and it'll help prevent the dreaded Worldbuilders Disease. The obsessive compulsion to keep building in exaggerated scale or depth until you completely burn out. Yep, Tolkien, I'm looking at you, creating unrealistic standards for our young world builders in the media. Honestly. Question 2. What's your genre? Now you've figured out why you're building your new world building project, you can start to think about which genre you'd like to build in. If it's your first world building project, I do suggest that you build in a genre that you're familiar with. The old write what you know. But maybe you're starting a new world building project because you want to explore something new, and that's great too. If your new world building project is for your RPG group, consider which genres they'd enjoy, and which genres you enjoy. If it's for your new novel, think of which time period or genre would best serve the story that you're trying to tell. Does it require futuristic technology or magic, for example? And if your motivation is to sell your setting, consider the current zeitgeist. Which are the popular and upcoming trends in your discipline? You can even experiment with traditional genres to try and come up with something new. I, for one, would love to see a steampunk, cyber, space opera, high magic extravaganza. With zombies and ninjas, obviously. And while we're on the subject, not all worlds stick completely to one genre either. Many larger and more complex worlds often use a genre blend. For example, the Techno-Gnomes in World of Warcraft, or the steampunk Dwemer from Skyrim. So another consideration at this point is how faithfully you want to stick to a single genre. Since we're talking about genre, here's a list of them to sink your teeth into. Take a quick look and see if you get any inspiration. Also make sure you take a look at the subgenres like magic level, technology level, and time period. Make sure you write down your genre somewhere safe. Again, I suggest your world's meta page on World Anvil. This is something you're going to want to go back to again and again, and it'll help you answer all sorts of world building questions. Want a new side quest? Well, what would be genre appropriate? What should this random NPC be wearing? The genre will be your guide. Can't think of a character backstory? Ask, and the genre will provide. Question 3. What is the scale of your world? By now, you've decided why you're world building your new setting and what genre you want to build it in. So this is a great time to talk about the size of your creation. As a general rule, the larger the space you create, the less detail you can build in. So my advice is always to start with the smallest scale you can that will satisfy your motivations. You can always expand it later. Some examples of scale include multiverse or universe, galaxy, solar system, planet, supercontinent, continent, country, state or island, region, city or other settlement. If you are choosing for a larger scale, there are tricks that you can use. Both Star Wars and Star Trek take place over a whole galaxy. However, only a few planets are really very well described at all. We don't usually know individual country names on them, for example. These places tend to have one or two locations built in a lot of detail, with some lesser expanded locations as well. In Star Trek TNG, the main space is the Enterprise. Lesser locations might be somewhere like the Starfleet Academy or Risa, which merit repeated visits during the plot. In Star Wars, a few planets, like Coruscant and Dagobah, act as a focus point for the whole galaxy. If you do choose a large scale like this, make sure the focus points that you select really reflect the richness and variation of your setting the best. You don't have to build on a big scale to tell a story with an epic feel, though. The Expanse is a great example of an epic feel sci-fi that takes place within a single solar system, and the War of the Worlds takes place only on Earth. And this is true of the fantasy genre too. Classic fantasy novels, like Lord of the Rings, use vast sprawling maps and huge areas over which to tell their stories. On the other hand, both the Shannara Chronicles and Elantris are epic fantasy novels which take place on the scale of a region, more or less. This allows the readers to become much more familiar with single locations because they're built in much more depth. The writers have kept the epic feeling by using high stakes rather than an enormous map, and therefore giving them less world-building work to do. Cunning, eh? On an even smaller scale, the novel Neverwhere, an urban fantasy novel, takes place in and beneath London. Readers become intimately familiar with different areas of London, and the city is explored in depth. It's highly effective storytelling. Similarly, much of the action on Star Trek's Deep Space Nine takes place on the space station, a kind of floating settlement. The depth of world building, the various alien races and the technological challenges provide more than enough conflict and drama and keep the setting interesting. That said, choosing a scale doesn't mean that you ignore the outside world. Rather, it limits the first world-building push that you have to do. If you know that your main characters are dealing with a plot that unfolds entirely in America, you don't need to worry about building Kazakhstan just yet. You can still make allusions to the outside world, and even have characters who come from outside of your main scale. But if your main characters aren't travelling there, you don't need to make it. It could remain colour and background. So, small scale doesn't mean boring, it just means more tightly focused world building. Scale may also shift between different instalments of your project, between different novels or different RPG campaigns set in the same world setting. And this is completely normal. Start with the smallest scale you can, and you can always build more later. But hang on, because there's another aspect that can colour your world even more. It's time to open the Pandora's box of grimdark. What is the mood of your world? So now it's time to talk about mood. What do you want your world to feel like? If you don't know what I mean by this, consider the difference between Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. Or in fantasy terms, the difference between Game of Thrones and The Princess Bride. The difference is the mood of the world, whether it feels desperate, dark and gritty, or bright and filled with wonder, or anything in between. The accepted terminology for this is a little bit unofficial, but it draws on the terms grimdark and noble bright taken from the 40k universe. Essentially, the grim to noble scale, which could be made more granular with grimmest, grim, bleak, neutral and noble, describes how much agency a single character has to make the world a better place, turn the tide of evil, or similar. In a noble world, a character's sacrifice yields permanent benefit, whereas in the grimmest or a grim world, it may prove utterly fruitless, or perhaps only an ephemeral success. So, for example, in Shannara Chronicles, a personal sacrifice saves the world. In Game of Thrones, it's forgotten in a moment. The dark to bright scale, which could perhaps include darkest, dark, grey, neutral and bright, describes the overall feel of a world. How good of a place is it to live? A bright world might be a true utopia, a home of the gods, or a fairy-type realm. A dark world is a crappy place to live, where life is short and cheap, and anyone in the story might die. An example of a dark world is Dark Souls, where you're not paranoid because everything is out to get you. An example of a bright world is Pratchett's Discworld, or the world of the Princess Bride. Even though bad things happen, the world is generally portrayed as a fair and just place filled with wonder. Star Wars or the Shannara Chronicles might be considered noble grey. The characters have a great deal of agency, but they live in a fairly crappy world. Battlestar Galactica or Game of Thrones, on the other hand, might be grim grey or even grim dark. The world they're set in is a fairly crappy place, and any sacrifices that the main characters might make don't give a long-lasting benefit to the world around them. Star Trek and The Princess Bride could be considered noble bright. The worlds are bright and filled with wonder, and any sacrifices or actions the characters make have long-lasting implications for the benefit of the surrounding. That excludes Star Trek Discovery, however, which is dank as F. This is actually much more complicated to explain than it is to understand, and once you've picked your mood, you can start to answer a lot of questions about your world pretty quickly. Need a city in a grimdark universe? Chances are it'll be filled with pollution, segregation, or some kind of famine. A city in a noble bright universe, on the other hand, might be a crime-free utopia full of science and learning where money has been made irrelevant. Apply this as needed to all aspects of your world building. But don't forget, contrasts and exceptions make the rule, and they're going to highlight the mood of your world even further. What is the theme of your new world? Themes are a great way to focus your world building, so don't just relegate them to first grade literature class. Some of the best GMs and writers use themes to really focus their world building and to provide a more impactful story. For example, Guy Sclanders, that's the great GM to you and me, in his book The Complete Guide to Epic Campaign Design, describes using themes to help world build everything from master plots and locations to NPCs. Weaving this repeatedly into your world building and the inner narrative of your story will create a rich undercurrent which will really surprise and engage your players and readers. Some examples of common themes include overcoming the odds, good overcoming evil, coming of age, the circle of life, or true love conquers all. So just to show you what I mean, let's create a quick settlement for each of these themes. Overcoming the odds could be a settlement in a floodplain erected on stilts. Good overcoming evil could be a settlement in a demon-ridden land that has high walls, magical wards, lighthouses, or some other beacons of hope. A coming of age settlement could have a dark history, but with repeated cycles of renewal and enlightenment. For example, the ending of slavery or the instigation of free speech. A settlement with a circle of life theme, on the other hand, could have a large graveyard which has been turned into a walking park for families and children. And on the theme of true love conquers all, an alternate world city could be named Julio, formed when Romeo and Juliet forced the Montagues and Capulets to work together and eventually created a Renaissance utopia of science and peace. If, on the other hand, you're going for a darker, or even grimdark world, your theme could be something like lawful good is lawful stupid, the corruption of power, the strong do what they can and the weak do what they must, love makes you vulnerable, everything has a price, or all flesh is grass. Once you've chosen your theme, world building becomes again a lot easier. Every time you're stuck, you can just go back to it for inspiration. And before you start world building, you can consider what storytelling motifs, images or music you can weave in your narrative to help underlie this theme even further. For example, the theme All Flesh is Grass might have repeated motifs of dead leaves, of large cemeteries, or of dead butterflies on the windowsill. You could play requiem music at certain points, or even have an NPC who is an undertaker. Combine this with the ever-living protagonists of a vampire game, for example, and you have a fascinating juxtaposition of the eternal surrounded by the ever-dying. If you're stuck for inspiration in an Overcoming the Odds campaign, you could create an NPC who is a warlord with a congenital defect. That's overcoming the odds, even if he's an enemy of the main party. Another idea would be to create an NPC who's a robotics expert, but comes from a farming community, or maybe even just the image of bright flowers growing up between the flagstones of a city. These small details will add flavour and texture to your world, and even though your players or readers won't necessarily pick up on your specific theme per se, they'll get an overall feeling of it from the world that you've created. Question 6. Where does the conflict come from? So finally, you've decided all that other stuff, and it's time to talk about conflict. However nice it would be to live in a perfect world, it certainly wouldn't make a very interesting story. Conflict is what sets people in motion and drives your scenario forwards. Choosing this large-scale conflict is going to make your world feel a lot more dynamic and authentic, even though you haven't created very much of it yet. But of course, since we've done all that work answering those 5 questions, we can use that as inspiration to create our conflicts. Start with your motivations. If your motivation for your new world was to create an RPG setting, think about what kind of games that your players like. If they're into political intrigue, that'll solve all your problems of conflict. If they're interested in exploration, you can create a new, unexplored continent on your world. And maybe a resource scarcity, just to nudge them on their way. You can look to your genre as well to help you with your conflicts. Watch out though, because some threats are genre specific. A hard science fiction world isn't usually attacked by dragons, just like a magic world is usually safe from a nanovirus. Scale is another one that can help guide you in terms of your conflict. If you have the scale of a country, you probably want to stay away from something like a world war. You could, though, have a plague of zombies or a people's rebellion, or even a civil war. Your chosen mood will also affect the conflicts that you have in your world. Grimmest worlds will be full of corruption, both politically and environmentally. Think pollution, chaos, and dark magics. There may be economic problems, famine and disease, and vast social inequality. A bright world, on the other hand, is more likely to have external conflict. Think dragons, alien invasions, or demons. Something that doesn't belong there and threatens that peace. You can also consider the theme that you've put in place. For example, if the theme is overcoming the odds, a great conflict to introduce would be a high child mortality rate. That would mean that literally everyone who survived was overcoming the odds. The theme of the corruption of power could be introduced by having exorbitant taxes from the local government, or even a thriving thief king who lives beneath the streets and demands protection money from all the inhabitants. Go back to your first 5 questions and you'll find all the conflict you need to make your world a treacherous and exciting place. So you can see, by thinking about these 6 questions, motivation, genre, scale, mood, theme, and conflict points, before you start your world building process, you can easily get the ball rolling. You can revisit this information again and again to help you when you get stuck with world building, to help you create elements on the fly, and to make your world feel like an authentic and realistic place. And they'll also be there to help you with writer's block, or when Worldbuilders Disease starts creeping up on you. Have you already been answering these questions for years when you started your world building project, or are these ideas kind of new to you? Let me know in the comments below. If you want more world building chat, head over to our Discord server. And if this video has been helpful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more world building content. If you haven't heard of World Anvil, then head over to www.worldanvil.com to get started. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter too. Now what are you waiting for? Grab your hammer and go world build! You could, though, have a plague of genres. Plague of genres is what I've got right now.
Plague of what now?
Plague of genres. If your motivation is to sell your setting, consider the current zeitgeist. What are your popular and upcoming trends in your discipline? But hang on, because I have to burp. Scale may also shift between different installments of your project. Different novels or different RPG campaigns. RPG campaigns.
I want to throw your stuff now.
Don't, you'll knock the camera and then we'll have to set everything up again. You fool. Okay, that was easy. We're at the end, let's make tea.